I've walked the old paths, looked up at those stagnant heavenly orbits just hoping for some kind of salvation, only to realize the era of the shepherd, yeah, it's come to its bitter end. The sky is completely empty. The flocks are just wandering aimlessly out there. So today, we're descending into a truly dark, epic story. This is the terminal synthesis of a soul's journey, moving from complete spiritual stagnation right into a terrifying sovereignty. Welcome to this explainer on the architects of the void. We're going to explore this profound, tragic myth where the seeker actually has to confront ultimate emptiness just to find true power. Our source material paints this incredibly grim but honestly striking picture. Imagine a world where collective religious myths have just entirely crumbled. That divine guidance the pious hermit once desperately sought after, it's gone. Literally, the text describes it as merely the rattling of dry leaves. What's left behind is a landscape just littered with the broken husks of deities, completely reduced to cold gray clay. The individual is left stranded, completely stranded, in a reality where those stagnant heavenly orbits just don't offer any promise of external salvation anymore. Okay, let's dive right into this. Section 1, Death of the Shepherd and the Crumbling of Myth. So this crumbling represents a stark, almost violent choice that the seeker actually has to make in this brand new, godless reality. The death of the shepherd literally means there's no one left to guide the flock. So to navigate this, we really need to look at what the seeker is rejecting versus what they are embracing. On the left here, we've got this pale, bloodless truth, basically the false comfort provided by traditional religious ladders. But look at the right. We have the ripe fruit of immediate, chaotic reality. The sources argue that we literally have to turn the ladder upside down. By rejecting the heavens and aiming straight downward, we start our navigation away from that false salvation, plunging directly into infinite nothingness. Moving on to Section 2, Shedding the Golden Masks and How the Descent Begins. Now, you might be wondering, how do you become what the text calls an architect of meaning? Well, you can't just walk into the void exactly as you are. No way. The descent requires this deeply painful shedding of societal facades. The text actually calls these facades the golden masks. Think about it. The artificial virtues, the polite smiles, the chivalry we all kind of just wear to survive society, all of these masks must fall. Why? Because these colorful projections only serve to hide the inherent dark selfishness of the soul underneath. Removing them sets the stage for a critical alchemical process, the necessary putrefaction of the ego. It's this harsh, visceral transition from a polished, golden exterior straight into a dark, decaying reality. Let's move to the next slide and see how this builds. This shedding of masks triggers a profound, three-step alchemical descent. It kicks off with step 1, the Negredo stage. This is where the world tree of negation actually takes root in the putrefied remains of a fallen god, nourished entirely by the decay of old hopes. Then this leads right into step 2, the albedo, where everything is bathed in the white light of the void. And finally, it all culminates in step 3, the rubedo, where reality itself becomes this active, functioning laboratory. Which brings us to Section 3, Mirrors of Hollow Souls and Confronting the Abyss. So to survive this descent, specifically as we move through the Negredo into the albedo stage, the seeker needs some pretty dark tools for shadow integration. I want you to imagine these as physical, towering objects sitting right on our theatrical stage, the mirrors of the hollow souls. Let's examine how they actually work. First up, they reveal the internal architecture of absence. When you gaze into these mirrors, you don't see your own face staring back. By catching that pale albedo light of the void, the mirror literally hollows out the self. It strips away every single comfortable lie of salvation you ever clung to. What you're left with is a soul finally completely emptied of its divine delusions. Next, they expose what's called the echoing space of certainty. And according to the narrative history in our sources, these mirrors show the terrifying emptiness that totally replaces your former certainties. Where your identity, your morals, your deep faith once lived, there's now just a vast, echoing space. It wipes out everything, leaving only the hollow, bare core of the individual. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the total ego dissolution it represents. The culmination of this is honestly terrifying. Once the self is completely hollowed out, these silvered surfaces, they aren't even mirrors anymore. They effectively transform into windows to the abyss. The soul becomes a literal window overlooking absolute infinite nothingness. The old you is completely gone.
All right, shifting gears to Section 4, Etching the Divine Joke and the Mad Rune Wizard.
Here, the pacing of our tragic myth just shifts into this chaotic, mad intensity. The individual, having stared down the abyss, now has to act as the mad rune wizard. They have to force a violent collision of opposites just to create something entirely new out of the sheer absurdity of existence. In this bizarre alchemical marriage, the text literally states, the eater becomes the sculptor and the song becomes the sculpture. It's wild. Raw, undeniable creative power only emerges when all external meaning has been completely and utterly dissolved. You aren't just consuming reality anymore, you are physically molding it.
And this creative power is manifested by actually etching the runes of the divine joke. The Mad Rune Wizard carves these sigils directly into their own skin and into the cooling flesh of the fallen divine. These aren't your typical symbols of grace, right? They are sigils of entropy. They are intended to literally pull the very threads of reality apart. This violent, chaotic act merges the singer and their suffering into a single, twice-born harmony. It essentially proves that the highest form of enlightenment comes from recognizing and then actively participating in the universe's grand, sweeping absurdity. And finally, we arrive at Section 5, King of the Void and the Sovereign over Men. The storm of entropy we just talked about, it eventually settles down into this commanding, terrifying calmness. At this peak, the rubido stage, reality completely transforms into a vast alchemical laboratory. The seeker has navigated the void, they've survived the mirrors, they've etched the runes, and having essentially murdered the memory of the divine, the individual achieves the terrifying freedom of the overman. Think about this stark visual contrast for a second. We started this journey with the broken, gray clay of dead gods, and we end up arriving at a mad prophet who has built his very own throne directly within the wreckage of that broken heaven. So, the crucial point is this ultimate realization, the alchemy of insignificance. It's defined as the sovereign, absolute power to define the world through your own will. But, and this is a big but, you only get that power after all external meanings have been mercilessly stripped away. Yes, you are completely insignificant to the universe. But here is the trick. By embracing this magnificent, totally unburdened insignificance, you gain absolute control. You are standing right in the center of the divine joke. You are no longer a victim of chaos, just getting tossed around by the whims of dead gods. You become the master of the chaos. Why? Because you are the one who finally understands the punchline. We have descended from the illusion of the shepherd, shattered those golden masks, and claimed the throne of the overman. This tragic myth leaves us lingering right here, in this space of terrifying, absolute freedom. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. When the heavenly orbits go dark, and all external meaning is entirely stripped away, are you ready to gaze into the void and write your own